All right, so at this time, we'll move then to comments from environmental stewardship. Steve Box, did you want to get Doug Box no relation to set up your presentation here?
No, that would be for the next item 10.
You do want to wait till item 10. Okay. All right.
But I think Eric has a few comments he wants to make relative to our comments what we sent in.
Yeah.
You want to do that under agenda item 9?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Eric Allman, I guess the floor is yours.
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to make comments to follow up on the written comments, which were intended to address some issues raised in the last meeting. First, to address the Colorado River alluvium. That is the aquifer for which environmental stewardship is not proposing a desired future condition this round. We do feel like we appreciate the attention to that alluvium in the GAM, and we do feel like ultimately a DFC would be appropriate there. And that it warrants independent consideration, and that it is sufficient to meet the definition and criteria for a minor aquifer under the Texas Water Development Board, and we'd encourage GMA 12 to recommend acknowledgement of that as they go forward to the Texas Water Development Board. And with regard to the Carrizo, Calvert Bluff, Simsboro, and Hooper aquifers, environmental stewardship is asking that a DFC independently protective of surface water be adopted in this round. I know that conversation has been ongoing for 10 years now. We feel like the science is there to begin to address it through a DFC. What we proposed in the original written comments was one based on the environmental flow standards developed as part of the SB3 process, but we did want to note the important thing is get something in place, and GMA 8 upstream of GMA 12 has used more of a water budget type of an approach. And we certainly would be open to that if that's something that the GMA would prefer to take. We do feel like there's joint jurisdiction there where the GMA and groundwater districts have responsibility for surface water protection. And lastly, we did want to follow up on some comments regarding the whether you insure and kind of design the DFC around existing permits that have been issued. We do note that the DFC needs to balance all factors, including both surface water and all water rights there. And all property owners in the district own their water and have the right to a fair share of that water, including the ability to decide to conserve that water. And we have concern that if the DFC is designed around all permitted pumping, then that is placing the private rights of those already with permits above those of people who perhaps have not sought permits or those who want to conserve their water. Those permits that exist have been issued on the assumption that an adaptive management approach would be taken going forward. And we think that's the better approach to try and consider those issues is more on an adaptive management approach as you head forward. And so that is kind of follow up on our written comments in a nutshell and try and clarify some of that. And I certainly am here and available for any questions that you might have. As is Steve. Steve has looked into some of the DFCs developed on surface water in other districts. If you've got a question specifically on that, he can address questions on that. Thank you for your time.
Well, at this time, we'll move to agenda item 10, evaluations, discussions, and consideration of past and future pumping scenarios using the Sparta, Queen City, Carrizo, Wilcox groundwater availability model and results, including predicted water levels and water budgets. Steve Box, are you ready now?
I am. If you could put that slide on.
All right, Doug Box, if you'll put his, there you go.
Let's go all the way to the first main graph. I think it's 9 or something like that. Next one, that one. Go back. So my comments are based upon having read literally what the number 10 item said, and that was that we were this item on the agenda is to discuss the various simulations and what they mean relative to the impacts on the DFCs and the likes. What I want to express here and reassert is that when we look at this graph, and this is the new GAM, and I'm with Alan, we believe in the new GAM. We believe it is the best available science we have, and it's what needs to guide our decision making until we have better science that might be based upon field data and the likes. But for now, this is the best we have, and the best we have tells us that the current DFCs that were adopted in 2017, when run in the new GAM, show that we will not exceed, or we will not cause the Colorado River to go into a losing stream scenario. Whereas if we look at S7, you can see that that is a much more highly impactful scenario for the river. And we need, what I'm going to be requesting is that as we go through the future analyses, whether it be S9 or S10 or back to S7 or whatever it is, as the consultants are making their runs, I want them to also provide us with similar information relative to what are the predicted impacts on the Colorado River. And if you'll flip down a couple more to the next slide, or next actual graph, down, next graph, there. And also the impacts on the Colorado River tributaries. And quite honestly, it would be appropriate on a GMA level that this be done for both the Colorado River and the Brazos River, so that we take into consideration, as we are determining what DFC run to use, what impacts that implies on the surface waters that are related and are the subject of our considerations as we move through this process. So bottom line is, I would like to see that these future runs also include the impacts on the rivers and the tributaries in both basins, and that those be presented along with the other data, and so that we can look at that as we move along in this process. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make this statement, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Anybody got any questions?
Steve, I've got a comment. Yeah, this is Alan Day. And Steve, I appreciate all the comments the environmental stewardship's done, and your participation in this presentations. I greatly appreciate. This is an area that we need to be investigating. The only comment that I'll make on this, and I don't know if it's true for anyone else, but it certainly is for us. There's the groundwater model that we now have is not a groundwater surface water interaction groundwater model. I mean, there's a little aspect that's in there, but it is not a true quantitative groundwater model that will assess surface water groundwater interaction at the level that y'all are advocating. And it would, for us, it would be just absolutely irresponsible for us to develop a surface water DFC without serious quantitative analysis or numbers. We just have to have that. I think in your comments earlier, in your presentation earlier, you know, and rightfully so, you said it's going to take some money. It's going to take some buy-in to get an effective groundwater model built that'll do exactly what you're wanting. And I'm all for that. I stand behind you on that. We don't have that right now. So I just want to let you know where we're coming from. I need something quantitative that I can wrap my head around and arms around, my board can, so that we can earnestly, if we are to develop one, that we have something that we can stand on. And I do appreciate everything you said, Steve.
Can I respond to that then?
Sure.
Alan, I guess I would not agree with you that this is not a groundwater surface water model. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars making sure that this model was greatly improved in its capacity to make its predictions relative to the impacts of pumping on surface waters. And this is the best science that we have. And certainly there can be more work done. And the comment relative to we need a lot more money to get the field data to help validate this model. That is very true. But we can't, in a adaptive management process, sit on our hands whenever we have one of the best models probably in the state now for groundwater surface water interaction, and not take steps forward to develop protective measures within the DFC process to protect and these resources that are linked together in reality. Groundwater and surface water, they do interact, and we need to. I think the districts and the GMA have a responsibility to take the steps now to start putting desired future conditions in place that protect these. We have modeling that says that we have the potential for unreasonable impacts, and we need to take that information and deal with it.
Steve, it's John Seibert. I mean, I think one of the concerns is when you see these quantities, and with the groundwater DFCs, they're measurable indices, water levels, etc. With the surface water, at least at this point, how do you measure these changes in flow? I mean, the model talks about that. With the DFCs, we get the model information, and then there's going to be field verification of that quantitative adopted DFC. But with the rivers, how do you do that?
Good point. And that's where I've been looking at what GMA 8 has been doing relative to this. They have adopted desired future conditions, and they have adopted those based upon their water budgets and the predicted impacts on the rivers and streams. Now, I agree that on a quantitative basis, these are not, it goes back to all models are, bad, some of them are useful. And I think this model has become more useful over time. We really have not seen much change literally in what the models predict as far as trends from the old model. What has gotten better is that the alignment with what it is saying is better aligned with what empirical data we do have. LCRA Saunders back in 2007, 8, and 9 did some very good work and very quantified work to make estimates of what the impact of what the groundwater inflows were to the Colorado River in this region. And based upon those, this model is much more accurate with respect to its agreement with that data. And yes, we need more field data to make it more accurate, but we do have these estimates now of what the impacts are, and what we're looking at is requesting is that we use the environmental flow data that is based upon much greater levels of examination than what we have done here, to put a boundary on what it is that we that is acceptable, and say that the desired future conditions need to protect those environmental flows at those levels in the Bastrop gauge, and as we get better modeling and better field data and better ability to measure that gap that you're talking about, we should be able to more accurately remedy the situation with respect to whether or not we make regulatory decisions that impact the actual pumping. But for now, I think we need to move forward with the science that we have.
Okay. Anybody else of the GMA 12 representatives want to ask anything else of Steve Box?
I've got just one quick question. Your comments so far have always focused on using the Bastrop gauge. It's the Highway 21 bridge, or the 2171 bridge in Bastrop. But that leaves out a large portion of the Bastrop. It basically excludes Bastrop's return flows. It excludes Cedar Creek, and it would exclude any contributions from the other aquifers that are within the GMA that may be contributing to stream flow. In terms of a metric, if we're going to move in this direction, wouldn't something like the stream gauge at 95, at the 95 bridge in Smithville, make a more accurate benchmark for making determinations like this?
I think those are good considerations that we should make. That we should also think in terms of what does the gauge at the 969 bridge tell us. The primary reason for using the Bastrop gauge for this purpose is that it is the only gauge that, under the environmental flow standards, is a benchmark gauge. There are only about, there's the Bastrop, there's the Columbus, and I think a Wharton gauge that are the ones that are designated in the environmental flow standards as the one, and have standards set on them that we can use as our benchmark. But certainly, as we really start wrapping our heads around what's really happening in this reach of the river, we need to be looking all the way from 969, where that gauge is more involved with the Hooper and the Simsboro, and then down to Bastrop, where we're more involved with the Carrizo and the Calvert Bluff, and then down to Smithville, where we're actually then having, like you say, collected in that point the impact of the Sparta and the others on a holistic basis. I would recommend and encourage us to move in that direction next year.
Hey, Steve, this is Andy Donnelly.
Here, Andy.
Couple questions. You talked about Bastrop gauge, but a vast majority of what comes by the Bastrop gauge is coming out, or is what's coming into the district. And I wanted to get back a little bit to what John talked about earlier, which was, the ability to monitor and quantify, surface water impacts. Your response, you talked a lot about, estimates, and Saunders had done estimates. But when we get to DFCs, we're talking about management. We're talking about potential curtailment. And we have to have a DFC that can be quantified and measured, because we can't very well come to people and say, we're going to curtail based on our estimate of what happened, because there's a lot of assumptions that have to go in to coming up with those numbers. And I see it being very problematic coming in and saying we want to do curtailment based on our estimates.
Well, certainly the Bastrop gauge is not an estimate. That's a real impact.
Well, what's going on at the Bastrop gauge is largely due to what's going on outside of the district in GMA 12.
When we look at the estimated outflows to the Bastrop gauge relative to the work that Saunders did, and when we look at what the flows were during the last drought, and this is the reason I'd like to have the hydrographic separation work done, we find that probably somewhere between 20 and 50% of the water that is flowing past Bastrop are actually from groundwater. And certainly we do have the ability at that point to do the
from groundwater from the district, or from groundwater overall?
Well, from groundwater overall.
Okay, so again, a lot of that is occurring outside of the district. If you look at what's going by the next gauge up, that's outside of the district, and what's going by Bastrop, a vast majority of what goes by Bastrop is coming in from outside of the district. So, we're talking about DFCs for the district.
969 is not outside the district, and there are not very many aquifers above the 969 that contribute much. There's very little there. Most of what down that river is what is released from Longhorn Dam and return flows during drought conditions, extreme drought conditions. So it's pretty easy to do a mass balance there, and certainly that's what I go back. That's why the hydrographic separations are important, because they help us start understanding that, and certainly our modeling is telling us what is predicted as being the impacts by our district of that flow.
Well, let's be clear about that. The mod flow is not a groundwater surface water model. People think that because we have a stream and a river package, that it's a groundwater surface water model. Those packages are there to get water into and out of the groundwater budget. It is a groundwater model. The surface water components of it are pretty rough first order approximation, and they're really there to focus on what's going on in the groundwater budget. So we need to be careful about saying, yeah, hey, this is what it says, this is what the groundwater surface water interaction, because the model's not designed to be a surface water model. It is a groundwater model. And we need to be very clear on that.
The model certainly is giving us a warning signal. And if we need to do that other modeling, then we need to do that other modeling. And the model has been highly refined to do a much better job of groundwater surface water interaction. It's the best science we have, and we're instructed by the law that we're supposed to use the best science available in guiding our management. I agree, we need to have better and more accurate measurement. That's why we are doing the groundwater surface water interaction field studies, and a great deal more needs to be done there. Once again, I'll raise the concern there that the work that is currently being done doesn't have a groundwater component actually in it with respect to the direct measurements that are being done. And I think that's a weakness that we're going to continue to be hamstrung by.
Anyone else on GMA 12 have any thoughts, comments, or questions? Okay, any other consultants from GMA 12?
I have none, Steve.
Okay, Steve Young doesn't have any further questions.
I don't at this time, Gary.
Okay. Is there any other public comment that needs to be heard under agenda item number 10?
Thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion.
Thank you, Steve. I know you guys have put a lot into this. I know I can certainly agree with your sentiments and concerns, but at the same time, I'm afraid when it comes to quantifying results and then actually making management decisions, I'm not sure that we can put together enough information that you could really depend on, and certainly not that would stand up in court. And that's we don't want to get caught in a corner we can't work our way out of to accomplish a good purpose. So I guess I have those concerns as well. All right.